The Lonely Homesteader. There once was a village near a great forest, and although the winters were long and harsh, the unlimited supply of wood nearby kept every home and family warm and thankful. But one year there was a huge fire that claimed the entire forest. With winter approaching, the people didn't know what to do. No one knew of any other source of wood, even within great distances. Worry and fear began to well up as each family's woodpile dwindled toward nothing. They began to pray. The first shivering winds arrived. Blankets and warm clothes served as temporary respites, but wood was needed, and soon. Now, about a couple hours' ride out, there were two homesteads whose owners didn't care too much for the people of the village. It seems there was some history between them and the villagers that led them to just wanting to get away and stay away. And the feelings appeared to be mutual. They weren't even that crazy about each other. Well, a strange thing happened one particular frigid morning. A man with a huge sleigh full of wood stopped by one of those outside homesteads. The sleigh driver greeted the man cheerfully and told him, "My property has lots of extra fallen trees this year, and I knew about the fire, so I thought I'd take a trip over and see if you could use some wood." Well, the homesteader lit right up and welcomed the man in. The visitor ended up leaving half his load with the first man and went over to his neighbor and dropped off the rest of it. There was enough wood here to get through the next 10 winters. As both men stacked their new provisions, the first man was thinking, there won't be any wood around here for at least 10 years, so this might not even last that long. I'd better be really careful to make sure it lasts as long as possible. The next man didn't know what to do. He knew everyone in the village needed wood, but there wasn't enough to last even him till the forest revives. So should he just keep it? Or should maybe he sell some to the village? What should he do? As he thought and thought about it, two things nagged his mind. The picture of cold children and the fact that he got all this wood for free. Well, the next day was Sunday, and he knew what to do. Bright and early the next morning, he headed into the village for services. Before the first hymn was sung, he got up and told his story. And he finished by mentioning that if folks wanted to share in this provision, they could come out to his place and pick up some wood. Well, that was the shortest service ever in that church, as people could hardly wait to take him up on his offer. And they did come out, all of them. By the time the divvying up was done, each family had enough wood for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, when everyone left, the man realized that he only had enough for 2 weeks too. Stupid, he thought to himself. You should have at least kept up a season's worth. Oh well, he did feel pretty good about how thankful everybody was and how many invites to dinner that he got from people that he thought didn't like him a bit. As the 2 weeks came to an end, the homes began to get cold and the prayers went up again. And who should show up at the homesteader's place again but the sleigh driver with another load of wood? "You can have the whole thing this time," said the driver. "I passed the other place on the way in, and he still has plenty." The two men unloaded the wood and enjoyed a good supper together before saying good night. And this time the man knew exactly what to do. Bright and early the next morning, he headed back into the village for services. He wasn't near the stranger that he used to be since the first load of wood. He'd been to a couple of services as well as several families' homes for dinner. He felt more and more connected, and he couldn't wait to bring the news. Just like last time, the whole village came out and each family was given enough wood this time for a month. They all went home praising God for answering their prayers. This pattern continued throughout the winter. Every time supplies ran low, the sleigh would pull up with enough for all to share. The man not only enjoyed his new friendships with the families in the village, his friendship with the sleigh driver led to several overnight invitations to his place, some distance away. And even though his woodpile never had more than a month's worth in it, which it could have had years, he was happier than he could ever remember. Meanwhile, the second homesteader hadn't noticed all the activity at the other's place. He hadn't been to church in months, since the wood first came. He hadn't visited anyone, he just kept to himself, fearing that some no-good villager would try to steal his wood. But as the winter progressed, he couldn't help but notice his loads of wood were getting lighter and lighter. Finally, he chopped a few of the logs open and found them to be full of tunnels. Beetles had bored almost all the wood in each log completely away. He was basically burning bark. And it didn't take long for him to burn through that whole pile. He barely made it to spring and despaired what he'd do the next year. As spring began to appear, the sleigh driver now showed up with a large horse-drawn wagon filled with the last wood needed for the season. The two men, now good friends, went through the routine of unloading and then relaxing with supper. Then the homesteader asked his friend, "How is it you always showed up just exactly when we needed more wood?" The driver laughed and told him, "Well, I never used to come in this direction till the Lord gave me a profitable business connection in the next county over. With this new connection, I found myself riding by here quite often. So whenever I'd come by, I'd just notice when the woodpile was almost empty, and I'd know it was time for another visit. I used to check the other man's supply down the road too, but it was never empty. So I stopped checking and just visited you. When I found out you were giving it away as soon as you got it, I knew I'd found a man I could trust. So since you're a man I can trust, I've got a proposition for you. I'd like you to have some land next to my estate where you can build a house and help me with my business. That way you could make these deliveries to your village next winter and all the winters that follow till this forest is revived. And not only your village, but many others that depended on that forest. And if you're interested, there are other parts of my business that I could sure use your help with." So the homesteader was amazed at how his life had changed over the course of one winter, beginning with cold loneliness and ending with a life full of warm friendships and new purpose.